What's up, YouTube? This is C0-4 TV. So, the co-founder of Rolling Stone, Jan Werner, was removed from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame board by his fellow, or at least now former, board members for statements that he has made in an interview that are deemed to be racist and also extraordinarily sexist. So, what am I talking about? So he came up with a book. I think he has. Is it a book or is it a? Let me make sure I got this right. Yeah, it's a book called The Masters. And conversations with Bono, Dylan, Garcia, Jagger, Lennon, Springsteen, and Townsend. Of course, he's talking about Bono of U2, Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Bruce Springsteen, and Pete Townsend of The Who. So, the interviewer asked him, well, it's interesting that all of these individuals who you call the masters are not only all white, but they're all male. There are 7 subjects in your new book, 7 white guys. In the introduction, you acknowledge that performers of color and women performers are just not in your Zeitgeist, which, to my mind, is not plausible for Jan Werner. Janis Joplin, Joni Mitchell, Stevie Nicks, Stevie Wonder, the list keeps going. What do you think is the deeper explanation for why you interviewed the subjects you interviewed and not other subjects? He says, when I was referring to the Zeitgeist, I was referring to black performers, not to the female performers, okay? Just to get that accurate. The selection was not a deliberate selection. It was kind of intuitive over the years. It just fell together that way. The people had to meet a couple criteria, but it was just kind of my personal interest and love of them. He adds, insofar as the women, just none of them were as articulate enough on this intellectual level. The reporter pushes back, incredulously asking if he really doesn't think Joni Mitchell was articulate enough to talk music on an intellectual level. He responded, it's not that they're not creative geniuses, it's not that they're inarticulate. Although, go have a deep conversation with Grace Slick or Janis Joplin, please be my guest. You know, Joni was not a philosopher of rock and roll. She didn't, in my mind, meet that test. Not by her work, not by other interviews she did. The people I interviewed were the kind of philosophers of rock. He then said this about black artists. Oh, black artists, you know, Stevie Wonder, genius, right? I suppose when you use a word as broad as masters, the fault is using that word. Maybe Marvin Gaye or Curtis Mayfield. I mean, it just didn't articulate at that level. Okay, this is my thoughts on that, right? On the one hand, you can't tell somebody who they're supposed to interview in a book, right? Like, you can't tell him because of current societal standards, you have to include this, you have to include that because it's politically correct. I do agree with that. He should be able to interview who he wants to for his book. That's true. But his reasoning for why not including women and black people, apparently, because you judge them to be intellectually inferior when it comes to the craft of music. Well, maybe part of the reason why that's the case is because when they were alive or when they were entertainers, they may not have had, especially with black people, especially in those days, maybe they didn't have the educational background to be able to articulate themselves in the big $50 words that you want to use that impresses you, you know what I'm saying, to that capacity. But they could still articulate themselves in a manner that is clear and concise. To sit there and say that somebody like Stevie Wonder is not a master of music, or, you know, for instance, why didn't you interview Berry Gordy? I know he's a different genre of music, but Berry Gordy's not a master. But all of these guys are happen to just be of a certain persuasion, and that's one of the things that is still one of the banes of societal existence, is that when it comes to people who are black, who are gifted in some way, it's often seen as some sort of almost an autistic, and not to denigrate autistic people, but almost like an autistic, an autistic quirk, or, you know, some sort of God-given ability that they have been given, but in other areas they may not be that bright. But when it comes to other people, you know, it's the gift, but they worked hard at it, and they have mastered music on so many different levels. You know, they've studied music, and they've done their history, and they know they can break down the development of an album, which album was better, why this album was better, what this music period, that music period. You know, and a lot of that does come from people like him who are prejudiced in many ways. I'm sorry. Mike Tyson is one of the greatest philosophers that I've heard, as well as a historian. But if I say that, people are gonna look at me funny, because, you know, you hear these rumors that Mike Tyson has an IQ of 72, which is bullshit. And by the way, IQ tests are often not great indications of a person's intelligence. There are also things called creative intelligence that can't be measured by an IQ test. Supposedly, Al Capone had an IQ of 95. But, I mean, and yeah, I'm not condoning what he did, but you don't become a criminal mastermind by being an idiot. You know what I mean? So, yeah, at the end of the day, yeah, you do have a right to interview who you want to interview, but I've never been a big fan of Rolling Stone magazine anyway, because culturally it didn't really resonate with black people. And that's another thing. You know, he knows that. He knows the people who read Rolling Stone magazine, and he wants his book to probably cater to certain people. The problem, I think, with him is that, you know, he's at an age now, I'm assuming he's in his 70s, so that makes him a septuagenarian. He's probably at an age where he can't filter himself the way he used to. That's the thing what happens when you get older, man. You stop giving a shit, and you start saying what you're really thinking. You're not always filtering out thoughts, and, you know, you don't filter as well. You don't censor yourself as much as you used to. So people like him can get canceled. You know? So that's why he's in the situation he's in right now. You know, at the end of the day, I'm not reading that shit because of what he said. If he had gave a better answer, which is that I interviewed these people because I can relate to them, it has nothing to do with race, and I promise you in my next book, I'm going to prove it, because I'm going to show you that I have an interest in these other individuals. But to call Marvin Gaye, you know, not a true creative genius, and Michael Jackson, who was a absolute musical super genius. To say that they don't have the whatever, man, you know, that's bullshit.